Silence is power. Not the silence of a man who has nothing to say, but the silence of a man who has already decided. What you withhold shapes the room more than anything you could ever speak. Most men cannot stop talking, not because they have too much to say, but because silence terrifies them. When a man feels uncertain, unvalidated, or unseen, his first instinct is to fill the air with words. He explains himself before he is questioned. He justifies before he is accused. He volunteers his intentions as if the world requires his confession. This is not communication. This is leakage. Every unnecessary word is a map given to someone who did not earn the right to navigate you. When a man speaks to fill silence, he is not connecting, he is performing. And a performance always requires an audience. The moment you need an audience, you have already handed them power. Watch any room where power shifts. The man who speaks least is almost always the man who moves first. Not because he is calculating, but because he is not desperate. Desperation is loud. Certainty is quiet. The compulsion to fill silence is the compulsion to be understood. And the man who needs to be understood by everyone ends up being controlled by anyone. There is a version of strength that grips, that clenches, that holds its position like a man afraid to lose it. This is not steadiness. This is tension dressed as discipline. True steadiness has no grip because it has no fear of losing. A man who is genuinely unmoved does not perform calm, he simply has no reason to react. He is not suppressing anything. He has nothing to suppress. Most men confuse control with containment. They believe that holding their expression rigid is the same as being grounded. It is not. One is a performance of stillness. The other is stillness itself. The difference is felt in the room before a word is spoken. The man who grips is already losing. He reveals the thing he is protecting simply by how tightly he holds it. Tension is always a confession. It tells others exactly where you are vulnerable, exactly what you cannot afford to lose. The man who does not grip, who simply exists in a room without needing the room to validate him, that man is not playing a role. He has nothing to prove. And nothing is more commanding than a man with nothing to prove. There is a precise moment when a man stops explaining himself. The room feels it before anyone can name it. It is not arrogance. It is not coldness. It is the unmistakable quality of a man who has decided his actions are the only argument he intends to make. When you stop defending yourself, something strange happens. People stop attacking. Not always immediately, but they stop. Because defense invites offense. Every explanation you offer is an implicit acknowledgement that their accusation has merit, that their opinion requires your response, that you exist within a court where they are the judge. When you remove that acknowledgement, the court dissolves. The man who no longer explains forces others to sit with their own projections. And most people are not prepared to do that. They expected a reaction. When none comes, they have only themselves to examine. This is not a tactic. Do not treat it as one. The moment you stop explaining as a strategy, you are still performing. Only now you are performing silence instead of speech. Real silence is not a weapon. It is a standard. It emerges from a man who genuinely does not require your understanding to move forward. The shift others feel in that room is not intimidation. It is gravity, and gravity does not explain itself. A man who announces his limits has already begun negotiating them. The man who says, "I do not accept disrespect," is still asking for agreement. He has drawn a line in words, and words can be argued with, reframed, worn down over time. What he calls a boundary is, in practice, a declaration that requires enforcement. And anything that requires constant enforcement is not a standard. It is a demand. Boundaries without apology are not announced. They are demonstrated. The man with a genuine standard does not tell you what he will and will not tolerate. He simply responds, or does not respond. He stays, or leaves. He engages, or ends the conversation. His behavior is the message. No translation is required. This costs something. It costs the approval of people who need you to explain yourself. It costs the comfort of being understood in the moment. And it requires a man to be comfortable being misread, to know what he is, without needing others to confirm it. Most men cannot pay that price. So they announce their boundaries loudly and then quietly compromise them when the room pushes back. They perform standards they have not yet embodied. The man who has genuinely internalized a standard does not raise his voice when it is crossed. He simply acts as if the violation is now the other person's problem, because it is. There is a paradox at the center of masculine presence. The more a man performs strength, the less of it others feel. The more he projects, announces, and demonstrates his capability, the more he reveals that he is still trying to convince someone. The last person he is trying to convince is usually himself. Quiet strength is not humble. Do not confuse the two. The man who is genuinely powerful does not diminish himself. He simply does not need to amplify. He walks into a room and something shifts, not because he commanded it, but because the room adjusts to what is real. Performance always has a frequency. Others detect it without knowing what they are detecting. They feel the effort beneath the surface. They sense the man who is holding a pose. What they feel from the man who performs nothing is different. It is not softness. It is not warmth. It is the particular quality of encountering something that does not require your reaction. A mountain does not need you to acknowledge it. It does not arrange itself for your arrival. It is simply there, and its permanence changes the landscape around it without effort. This is the final truth about silence. It does not merely withhold. It reveals. The man who has mastered it does not use it to hide. He uses it to be exactly what he is, without negotiation, without performance, without the noise that most men hide behind. The less you perform, the more you become. And what you become speaks before you enter the room. Silence is the loudest roar. Not because it is dramatic, but because it is the only sound that forces a room to listen to itself. The man who has nothing left to prove has already won the argument that no one heard him have. Be that man.